This podcast may contain explicit language. It's a hard world for little things. The Night of the Hunter is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
And tonight, for our 272nd episode, we abide a battle between love and hate with The Night of the Hunter from 1955, celebrating its 70th anniversary. Directed by Charles Laughton, written by James Agee, cinematography by Stanley Cortez, music by Walter Schumann, starring Robert Mitchum as preacher Harry Powell, Shelly Winters as Willa Harper, Lillian Gish as Rachel Cooper, Billy Chapin as John Harper, Sally Jane Bruce as Pearl Harper, James Gleason as Uncle Bertie Steptoe, Evelyn Varden as Icy Spoon, Don Beto as Walt Spoon, and Peter Graves as Ben Harper. And we, of course, cannot do this by ourselves, so we welcome back our returning celebrity guest, host of the One Track Mind and Reels of Justice podcasts, making his third appearance on the show to date. Please welcome back Ryan Luis Rodriguez.
Celebrity I am, exactly. Yes, give me your praise. I feed on it.
How's it going?
It's going well. I'm glad to be back on this show. I've had several guest spots recently that didn't pan out really well, so I'm glad to be with you guys again because I have not had a bad time with you guys so far, so this should be fun. Plus, the movie's amazing.
Well, we certainly love hearing that. Anyone who comes on our show, we always want, number one, the guest satisfaction, and for you to have a good time. So that's great to hear. Thank you for that compliment. Now, to the movie at hand, why The Night of the Hunter?
This movie is, and I'm not overstating things, a goddamn masterpiece. It's amazing that Charles Laughton made only one film in his entire career as a director, and it turned out to be Night of the Hunter, which means he might be the greatest director of all time, because he has no bad movies. I mean, he has lots of bad performances as an actor, but that's something we can get into later. But he does not have any bad directorial efforts simply because he got his feelings hurt so badly by the critics on this one that he never made another one again and therefore assured his legacy.
I know it's certainly a high-ranking one among cinephiles and certainly a film that has somewhat of a cultish standing among people who watch a lot of movies. I don't know if this is a movie that resonates with the general public. In fact, if you said the name, I don't know if anybody knows this movie from Adam. It has no great defining characteristics, but it's notable in the amount of people that are notable that appreciate it. And we'll go over some of the directors that have directly spoken to this as being an influence.
It is notable that people have been trying to remake this movie for the past 30 years, and no one has actually made the opportunity to do it. Because a lot of people saying, well, I'm going back to the book. I'm going to pretend that this movie doesn't exist. I'm going to adapt the book, which is what William Friedkin did when he made Sorcerer. He said, I'm not making Wages of Fear. I'm basing it on the book. You can use whatever bullshit logic you want to, but people are trying to remake the movie, and it's just never going to happen.
Just a little background for the movie. The Night of the Hunter was released on July 26th, 1955, making this the 70th anniversary. The screenplay by James Agee was based on a 1953 novel of the same name by Davis Grubb. The novel and film draw on the true story of Harry Powers, who was hanged in 1932 for the murder of 2 widows and 3 children in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Contemporaneous critics and audiences did not take well to the film at the time, and director Charles Laughton took it so personally that he never directed another film. However, after decades of re-examination, the film has emerged from an initial cult following to be a highly celebrated and influential film. The film's lyrical and expressionistic style, borrowing techniques from silent film, sets it apart from other Hollywood films of the 1940s and 50s, and it has influenced such later directors as Rainer Werner Fassbinder, Robert Altman, Spike Lee, Martin Scorsese, the Coen brothers, and Guillermo del Toro. French film magazine Cahiers du Cinéma selected The Night of the Hunter in 2008 as the second best film of all time behind Citizen Kane. In 2008, it was ranked as the 71st greatest film of all time by Empire magazine in its issue of the 500 greatest movies of all time. In 2012, the Sight and Sound magazine's decennial greatest films of all time poll ranked it as the 63rd greatest film ever made. In 2022, the same poll put it at number 25. It has been recognized by the AFI on the following lists: AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills at number 34, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains, with preacher Harry Powell coming in as the number 29 villain. The Night of the Hunter was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry in 1992. The Night of the Hunter currently holds a 93% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 97 score on Metacritic, and a 4.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Now, you already mentioned that this was critically panned at the time that it came out. Why do you think that it has achieved such legendary status among cinephiles since then?
I think it has to do with the gradual appreciation of the work of Robert Mitchum. I think that this is an actor who has always been kind of at the forefront when he was making films before he died. And there was a resurgence of respect for him when he came back and played the good lawyer in Cape Fear, as opposed to in the Martin Scorsese Cape Fear, as opposed to the bad guy that he played in the 1962 Cape Fear. And I think around that time, especially Marty Scorsese, I call him Marty because we're on a first name basis, I think that he was really leading the charge for reappraisal of his output. And I think that has just remained with cinephiles ever since. And it only, as movies get more and more homogenized and they get less and less tied to a tangible sense of reality, I think that Robert Mitchum is going to be appreciated more and more as we go on to the next century, as it were, even though we're only 20 years into this century.
Part of the problem is most people have never seen it, let alone heard of it. And if you sit down and you watch it, the cinematography and the light and shadows that are done, the way it's shot, the imagery, the boat going down the river with like a spider web in front of it, and then there's like bunnies in front, showing each aspect of what the children are going through. There's so much symbolism and such. This film was probably 35, 40 years ahead of its time. It's no wonder nobody in the 50s liked it. They didn't understand it. It just looks so odd to from everything else being done.
Totally fair.
Based on the various techniques that you're describing, Lawton did say specifically that he wanted to go back to a more silent era symbolism making of films that was much more expressive of the visual quality as opposed to the spoken word on film. And I think that's what separates this out a little bit is 50s movies, as much as I love them, are very exposition heavy. They're very dialogue. They're very much from the theater kind of background is they have a ton of dialogue being thrown at you constantly, and they don't have as much visual quality. I think that's part of my difficulty with the film is that I gravitate much more towards dialogue heavy films because of my theater background. I gravitate towards that just so much more. And I think this has a lot more to say that's not necessarily spoken. And so I may not always get all of the imagery and the subtlety and the other pieces that I think people like Ryan really appreciate.
It's one of those things where the 50s were very restrictive in terms of what you could actually put on screen. And this movie is actually kind of transgressive in what it gets away with. Like, there are certain things in here where you look at, like, the ratings board and you go, how the hell did this get approved? How in the hell in 1955 did somebody say, oh, when that switchblade comes out of Robert Mitchum's pocket, it's not an erection. No, what are you talking about? That's crazy. No. There's no subtext here. But that's what the movie's drowning in, is subtext. And it's tremendous.
So my relationship to this movie, as I mentioned before we got on, this is only the second time I've seen it. I remember last year watching this. I want to say it was around maybe the end of summer, early fall, something of that. I watched it with Dad, who had never seen it before, my mom and my grandmother. And as much as my dad will now claim that he loved it from the start and really enjoyed it the first time, I just remember something very different. When we originally saw it, both of us thought that we didn't understand why people thought this was such a profound and great movie. Now, that being said, this most recent viewing, I was much more receptive because I think I wasn't as focused on the plot. And so I could pick up a lot more of the visual and the subtle cues and the things that we talk about when you're not so focused on the story aspect, but rather some of the surrounding accoutrement that is a part of this film. And so I think I picked up a lot more, and it may be a film that I appreciate more and more as I watch it repeatedly. But for 2 viewings in, I gave it a fair 4 out of 5 right now for me, but it may appreciate over time. And the one thing that just is still slightly inaccessible to me is kind of the last quarter to 20% of the movie, where we get them showing up with Rachel and then him kind of the goofy ending to me that, I don't know, it doesn't make a whole lot of narrative sense based on where they've been going through the rest of the film. It may be accurate to the book and maybe to the real life story that this is based upon, but I still have a little bit of inaccessibility from that. But Dad, what is your relationship to this?
I call this a 3-day film for me, which is a film that you watch and then 3 days later you figure out you liked it. I think I was so unsure when I saw it the first time that I wasn't sure what was going on. And I think it took 3 days for it to mill around in my head to the point of appreciating it, because it was not what I was expecting at all. And as a result, I think there's a certain shock value in it the first time you see it, because you think it's going to be something very different than it was. But overall, about that time, I started thinking, that was really a well done film. The pacing was good. I did not find a real problem with it. I understand your thoughts of the last quarter of the film, but I have my theories as to why those things took place. I think it's a story of loss and of orphanage and of needing someone to, when you're a child, to take responsibility and care of you. And it was clear that the father, that originally, the best he could do was steal money and give it to his kids. And the mother could not do anything other than be stuck in her own misery and self-reflection and her situation. And it wasn't until the hunter chases them into the arms of another woman who graciously takes care of them that they have their own level of redemption.
I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to steal the term 3-day movie, and I'm going to use it as much as humanly possible from now on.
For context, the first 2 movies I remember my father describing as 3-day movies, number 1 was Blue Velvet.
Yes.
Fair. Very
and the
fair.
other one was The Hurt Locker.
Yes.
Oh. Interesting. See, I would go with Zero Dark 30, but Hurt Locker, that's an interesting one, yeah.
Well, I think when he watched it, because you have to go back into the 2009 brain, we were so still in the middle of the Iraq war, and it was so still fresh, because we hadn't even exited yet, that I think for anybody who is very politically active, constantly getting through the churn of 24-hour cable news, media, and entertainment, as he was back at that time, to experience that movie in a way that isn't talking points for the first time brought home a certain difficulty that was hard to unpack immediately.
Horror. Actual horror of what was going on. And it was so shocking to me, I could not understand and was just appalled having experienced it even on the screen. And it really made a big point of being on the big screen.
So you saw it in the theater and not on home video?
Correct. It was open for 3 days in Wisconsin Rapids.
That makes sense. I believe that one. I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, for anybody that needs context of what our theaters in Wisconsin Rapids, central Wisconsin, look like, I think there's still an Instagram photo from either last year or the year before.
Yeah.
On our socials. So you can find that at GMOAT podcast. But we are not here to discuss The Hurt Locker or Blue Velvet. We'll get back to The Night of the Hunter. And Ryan, what is your relationship? I have to assume it's quite long-standing.
Yeah, I saw this movie when I was in my first year of college. And it was when I was I always wanted to be a writer-director. That was the path I thought I was on. When I was in middle school and high school, that's what I thought the universe was demanding of me before I realized I didn't have the ability to pull it off. But that's when I started really falling in love with film. And Night of the Hunter is one of those that I picked up at the library on DVD. And I was like, I've heard this movie's great. I have no context for what would make it great. And then I just sat down and it was just rhapsodic. It was existential almost. How much I identified with this film and saw the nightmare logic and the dream logic, and just, I'm glad you mentioned earlier Blue Velvet, because it does remind me a little bit of what if they took David Lynch and said, make a movie about Frontierland at Disneyland. I think it would end up being Night of the Hunter.
Okay. I look forward to that theme park ride.
They were going to make it. It was called the Western River Expansion, and it was deemed too expensive, and they never did. So now all you got to do is look at that water and go, what could have been? Oh, what could have been?
So I feel like we've kind of already answered this question, but it is now a staple of this season. Dad, do you like this movie?
Yes, I like this movie a lot. As we'll get down to it on Rewatchability, I think this might be on one of mine. I need to put it in and watch it about once every year.
All right. Now, does the context of the period in which the movie takes place, as opposed to when it's made, have a profound effect on the story and how you perceive it? I mean, I obviously can only read about the Depression in books at this point, and there are not a whole lot of people that were alive during this period to be able to like talk or converse about it. But I do remember at least a few people, my great-grandparents, who were alive during this period, and some of the stories that they mentioned, and also some people who grew up in the farm communities of the 40s and 50s who were not particularly well off, that have similar stories to what kind of takes place in this movie. I have a feeling that the socioeconomics of the age and some of the trauma of this era was supposed to aid to when it was made, that may be out of context for some people in a modern sense.
I look at it kind of the way that now when horror movies set their time period in the 70s or 80s so that characters don't have cell phones and they can't immediately get out of troublesome situations. By being set in the time in which it's set, in the region in which it's set, I think you add a level of danger there, because there's that safety net for those kids is not there. And they need to get through, until they meet Lillian Gish, they need to get through life on their own. And they are, pardon my French, they're fucked when they start. And it only gets worse as it goes on.
I personally saw a lot of parallels with Grapes of Wrath. And this is Grapes of Wrath gone the wrong way, which is the same type of thing. The kid, or a hard scrabbled life, except that instead of trying to figure it out and living just economic poverty, they're taken advantage of by a master Sociopath.
I mean, did it really turn out that well for the Grapes of Wrath?
No, but it was a lot better than being chased around by a guy who murdered 25 wives.
Was it that many? I guess I missed
That's
that.
in the last part where he says, 25 wives all dead. Lynch him.
Okay. Yeah, I think the idea of lynching is also something that lives maybe in the history of the 20s and 30s in a way that even by the 50s wasn't as prevalent. It was happening, but it was much more contained than the 20s and 30s where it seemed to be happening left, right, and center.
Yeah, there were lynchings everywhere at that time frame.
Like, I'm not naive to think that there weren't lynchings up until probably the 70s. But
oh, yeah. Depends on your lynching, because I do remember even in the 90s, somebody was, I think it would be technically have been lynched when he was identified as being gay and drugged behind a car, if I remember correctly. I think that was treated as a lynching and a hate crime. And that's where basically the hate crime statutes of today come from.
Is that the case from like Milwaukee in the early 90s?
I want to say it was someplace like Iowa in the early 90s.
I swear the hate crime law came from a case from Milwaukee.
No, came out of this crime where he said something or did something in a bar, and they waited. 3 guys waited for him to come out, and they attacked and tied him up, drug him until he died.
Well, I'll get to my constitutional law class here in the fall, and maybe we'll discuss it then. But I remember something differently from undergrad as far as the challenge of a racial law being upheld. And I swear it's from Wisconsin. But anyway, we'll revisit that in a couple of months, I guess. So outside of the context surrounding the movie, what is the movie actually about? Dad, you've already kind of said your piece on it, but anything you would like to add?
No, I think it is a story of, well, I think it also is a critique of how easily people can get taken by false prophets and preachers.
Yeah, that's similar to kind of what I had as well. At least the first, and I've said this multiple times, 3/4 of the film I thought was a lot about false prophets, wolves in sheep's clothing, greed and evil versus, I guess, some level of bravery. I know that the ending is supposed to insinuate that the bravest among us is the innocence of the children, and that's maybe the takeaway from this, but I find that still a little bit difficult to believe, because had it not been for an adult who kind of recognized pretty early on that this guy's not who he says he is and sees through him, would they have actually survived or even gotten to a better place?
I agree. I mean, I understand perfectly where you're coming from, but I think overall that is ultimately what the film is about. Is it's twofold, and I think there's the issue of the protection versus the lack of protection of the children, false prophet, and I think it is a portion greed.
I believe that it is a postmodern fairy tale. I was listening to the commentary that they have on the Criterion Blu-ray, and they frequently mention Lillian Gish's character as Mother Goose. And so it's clear that Lawton was definitely trying to make a statement regarding kind of like the nature of fairy tales, which, if you look at them in origin, they're hideous. They're horrifying. They always involve children dying in brutal ways. They always depict gruesome violence. And this is his way of kind of like reclaiming that and saying, no, all these stories you've been fed as a child are horseshit. Like, there is real evil out there, and it's not a big bad wolf. He's not going to come to eat you with his big teeth. It's going to be the person who presents themselves as the most civilized, as the most evolved. And that is the Robert Mitchum character. He comes in there. He is the wolf, but he's not a physical wolf. He's a theoretical wolf, if you will.
It does kind of explain the one scene where Gish is walking down the street and the children are all walking in step behind her like she's leading a band. It kind of is that Mother Goose look. Mother walking with all the children or all the goslings behind her.
I could definitely see some Brothers Grimm in here.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is true because they were some warped shit.
Yeah, look no further than Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
So where is Harry Powell in the pantheon of movie villains? A conversation we've had many times before.
It's a good one, because I always compare this performance to Max Cady in Cape Fear 1962. And I actually wrote it down in my notes. Who's worse, Harry Powell or Max Cady? That's the main note that I have at the top of my list. And I still can't figure it out. All I know is that he's definitely one of the most despicable figures in the history of cinema. And I think that that's not going to change as cinema continues to evolve or devolve, however you want to look at it. But I think that he is someone to watch, because he will always be top of that villains list for me. Like, he's always going to be up there.
See, there's that short list that I think a lot of people come up with that are like fun villains, such as Anthony Perkins in Psycho, or Hannibal Lecter, Darth Vader, Hans Gruber is in that list. You know, the ones that like we have a certain extra affinity for because they're fun, they're a little bit characterized, and they're kind of larger than life. I don't see him as quite among that group for me, but he could be reasonably in that next group of villains that are a little bit more subtle, that have a little bit more power, and they don't view themselves as a villain per se. They feel their own self-righteousness a little bit. He would be kind of in that territory for me. And I've said to a degree that I'm not sure that J.K. Simmons' character from Whiplash is a villain per se, but he'd be kind of in that same category where they feel they're justified in their actions.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to remember Rafe Fiennes' character's name in Schindler's.
Oh, Eamon Goeth?
Yeah. I think he's the most despicable villain in film. I rate him near the top. And so Harry Powell is in that same category because he is such a sociopath, but I don't put him in the list of that category.
He also presents the illusion of authority. The illusion that he's actually on your side because he's a preacher. What bad things could preachers do? Says the person who's just lived through the past 35 years of human society. It's one of those things where it's like, if you present yourself as having authority, kids, as smart as they may be, they might believe you for a little bit until you start doing some really, truly shady things. Yeah. But that cross speaks volumes. That communicates something to people that doesn't mean the same thing to everybody, but it definitely, to some people, they look at that and they go, well, of course I can trust this human being. And the result is actually the opposite.
I think that's probably the single greatest classicness point to this movie, is the nature of preachers not being all good.
Or good at all.
But we will get to that here in a little bit. Dad, do you have a plot summary ready for us?
I do. The Night of the Hunter is a suspenseful drama about a dangerous man, Robert Mitchum, posing as a preacher. Set during the Great Depression, the story follows Harry Powell, a charismatic, unsettling figure who travels the countryside claiming to be a man of God. In reality, he is a con artist and killer. When Harry hears about a man who hid $10,000 from a bank robbery, he marries the man's widow, Shelly Winters, to try to find the money. However, the only people who know its location are her two young children, John and Pearl. As Harry becomes increasingly violent and threatening, the kids flee down the river to escape him. They find safety with a kind woman named Rachel Cooper, Lillian Gish, who protects lost and abandoned children. Ultimately, Rachel stands up to Harry and helps bring him to justice. The movie mixes horror, mystery, and a beautiful black and white visuals. It's a story about good versus evil and how bravery can come from even the smallest and quietest people.
Thank you. And just add in a small detail, $10,000, and I adjusted it from about 1930. I'm going to guess that that's approximately when this took place. They say the Depression, and that's like a year-ish, a couple of years into the Depression. Let's take that as a barometer, but it'd be roughly equivalent to $193,000 today.
Damn.
Just for context.
I would kill those kids for $193,000.
Yeah.
I mean, what? I didn't say that.
I didn't hear anything. Did anybody in the audience hear anything? No.
They couldn't have, because I didn't say anything. There's just a bunch of silence on the track. I don't know what to say. I didn't edit this episode.
That is true. Did you know? The sequence with Powell riding a horse in the distance was actually a dwarf on a pony. It was filmed in false perspective.
I did know that, and that's all because of that damn Criterion commentary, which is outstanding. And I gotta say, the symbolism of a evil man in black, a devil in black, if you will, on a white horse, is about as obvious symbolism as you can possibly get, but man, is it effective in that moment. Even if you know how the trick was pulled off.
All right. Did you know? Later on in life, Robert Mitchum, who was usually indifferent to such matters, said that Charles Laughton was his favorite director and indicated that this was his favorite of the movies in which he had acted.
Did not know that, but I believe it 100%. I remember actually there was something in the commentary where he saw the movie and he seemed distraught when it was over, and he said, "I didn't know I could be that good." Or it's like, wow, that man has no vanity whatsoever. If he put in all these performances and he didn't think he was any good, he finally makes one. He's like, yes, that one I can be proud of. That's wow.
Did you know? Producer Paul Gregory and Charles Laughton presented key members of the crew, like cinematographer Stanley Cortez, each with 1% interest in the film. This was given to them on top of their salaries and is something that is never done. Gregory and Laughton said it was not done to encourage the artists, but to reward them for their artistry. This was done over the objections of United Artists.
There's a pun in there, but I'm not going to pull it out.
I do find this interesting that somebody who is a performer stepping behind the director's chair for once is the one who kind of, I don't know if he introduced point sharing, but to give it out to like the crew and such, even on a film that didn't do terribly well, and so therefore it didn't really actually amount to a whole lot, I still think is significant. It's probably the closest to like a members own grocery store or a credit union kind of thing, that it's owned by the people who either are members of or are employees of.
It certainly assured that they would have a long career afterwards, because if you say like, well, they made points on that movie, and even if it's a movie that nobody actually watched, which is the case of The Night of the Hunter, people will look at that and go, so they were given a percentage? Really? Okay, well, I got to get them for my movie, because clearly there's something that I'm not detecting.
Did you know? While the poor critical reviews are often cited as the reason Charles Laughton never directed another feature, Laughton himself said that he much preferred directing in the theater. There, you could constantly change and amend the production, adding lines, changing lighting and sets, but with film, once it was done, it could never be changed.
Completely contradicts what I said earlier in the episode, so of course I believe it.
I knew it was coming up, and I didn't want to undercut you in the moment, because I think that is the prevailing narrative of people, but certainly an interesting counter argument, or counter detail, if you will. Did you know? Charles Laughton reportedly worked well with the boy playing John, but did not get along with the girl playing Pearl, and shouted at her on occasion. As Laughton had the camera continue to roll after the scenes were finished, the camera often caught her reacting to him. Some of these outtakes were used in the final editing process as reaction shots to the preacher's character.
I did know that. because he did not ever yell action or cut. He would let the entire film mag run through without ever slating anything so that he could get, spontaneous reactions from his cast and crew. And the one scene that little girl has where she sings, it's one of those things. So I don't know if that was one of the situations where he was just like, just keep rolling, just keep rolling, just keep going. I have no idea, but it is one of the most iconic scenes in the film. So I have to believe that his process had something to do with that.
There is a part of this that is without ego, that he at least was self-aware enough to recognize that while she didn't particularly like him, he could still use that for his own purposes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, did you know Robert Mitchum was very eager for the part of the preacher? When he auditioned, a moment that particularly impressed Charles Laughton was when he described the character as a diabolical shit. Mitchum promptly answered, "Present."
See, those are the kinds of behind-the-scenes stories that I really like. Oh, God. Now I just love Mitchum even more than I did before, and man, I love that guy. Oh, boy.
All right. So that looks like a good spot for our first break, and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 273rd episode, we welcome back five-time club member Walter Gaynor for a discussion on the existence of the devil with The Usual Suspects, celebrating its 30th anniversary. Directed by Bryan Singer, written by Christopher McQuarrie, cinematography by Newton Thomas Sigel, music by John Ottman, starring Benicio del Toro, Kevin Pollak, Chaz Palminteri, Stephen Baldwin, Pete Postlethwaite, and Kevin Spacey. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Before we get too much further, let's check in with our guest, Ryan. What is going on with you? What are you working on, and where can people find you?
Oh, boy. I work on two different podcasts. The first being One Track Mind, which is a commentary-focused podcast where we look at films through the prism of their audio commentaries. If you like physical media, you will like us. And I believe it's the only commentary podcast that matters because as far as I know, it's the only one that exists. And we have every other week, we have a guest. And we've talked about some amazing films recently. We talked about Baby Driver and Django and coming up soon, I believe, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We never have a set thing. There's no arc to the story. It's just whatever movies I feel like introducing to my guests, and they get to pick basically everything. So I give total autonomy to other people so that I don't have to take responsibility for my own actions. And then I also do a podcast called Reels of Justice, which is a fake movie court where we have a prosecutor, a judge, a jury, and a defender, and we try to conclude whether or not a movie is guilty of being a bad movie. And that one's every week instead of every other week, and we have a special guest every week, and it's always a lot of fun.
Excellent. So, as usual, all of our guest links are available both in the show notes as well as on the website. Certainly go check him out at those places. Any other socials that you want to drop?
Sure. I'm on Blue Skies, my place of choice. I've left the Bird app. I'm never going back. It's onetrackmind.bsky.social, and then I'm on Instagram frequently at one, that is the numeral 1, Track Mind Podcast. And then also I have a Patreon page where you can find up to 300 hours of bonus content, including the first two podcasts that I recorded going all the way back to 2018, all the way through 2022. And you can find that at patreon.com/onetrackmindpodcast. A lot of stuff there. If you're at all interested in the show, there is not just those episodes, but there's also bonus content for almost every episode in those series. And there will be more bonus content coming soon. So pay attention to that.
Excellent. And again, if anybody wants to check that out, you can look in either the show notes or on the website to find where to find Ryan and all the great things that he is doing on his shows. Okay, Dad, before we get to performances here, do we want to do the GMOAT Hall of Fame for July tonight or next week? It's rather short. I have an obvious candidate and I have a less obvious candidate.
All right, let's go ahead.
Okay. So, which of the two potential nominees would you like me to start with?
The less obvious.
This is a person who is famous for being in, or basically being the good luck charm for a particular studio. He was in The Incredibles, Wall-E, Toy Stories 1 through 4, but we've discussed 1 through 3 on the show, and Inside Out. I give you John Ratzenberger.
The second you said a certain company, I immediately knew John Ratzenberger. That says it all.
As a voice actor, yes.
I mean, as an actor, period.
Yeah. I mean, he was, other than Cheers, I have never seen him do much else other than voice acting, except he did have one small part in A Bridge Too Far that I remember him in.
He has a guest spot on the first season of Poker Face that is actually quite good. He plays a mechanic. And he's only in it for like 3 minutes, but it's 3 minutes well spent because unfortunately he's not doing Pixar movies anymore. Used to be the good luck charm, hasn't been for the past 3 or 4 movies. Hopefully, since they're gonna make Toy Story 5, they bring back Ham. I don't know. I'm not in charge of things.
Well, I think that's already going to be kind of difficult given that Don Rickles and Estelle Harris and some of the other people we discussed a couple of weeks ago have already passed. But you never know. Maybe they either replace it because they already had to replace Jim Varney as Slinky Dog for Toy Stories 3 and 4. So you never know. But, all right. So up or down, Dad? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. I think you could make an argument that because of the films that we've discussed, he's kind of a small part. Like, he's got a significant part in Wall-E, but he's got very small parts in The Incredibles and Inside Out. Like, it's almost a throwaway kind of character. He's not a significant part of those, but I'll give it to him. You know, there are worse people to certainly have in our Hall of Fame and that I've already nominated on the history of this show.
He's a cog in the machine. You pull out one cog, the entire machine falls apart. That's all I understand about machines.
He's the most oddball figure in our Hall of Fame so far, so it gives it a little bit of color.
Yes.
Now, the more obvious choice that I have to give you, his name on the poster denotes a certain level of quality and expectation regardless of any pre-existing IP. He has been recently knighted. He is a Academy Award winner multiple times over now. I give you Sir Christopher Nolan for Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, and Interstellar.
Okay.
Yes or no, Dad?
Well, I'm sure. Let me think here.
Savoring that question, just completely, just devouring it.
How long is he going to chew on this?
Come on, he won for Oppenheimer.
All
Just
right,
give it to
fine.
him.
You've beaten me down.
Yeah. Well, we have 2 more of his on tap for next year with Memento and I believe The Prestige. So
You're not doing Oppenheimer?
Not next year, no. We will eventually get to it, but it has not yet aged into the point where it can be selected for our program because it is not yet 5 years old.
Fair.
So 2028, it would be eligible. And I think that my father would have a difficult time with me not putting it on the list for 2028.
Damn right.
The question is, which week do you do Barbie and which week do you do Oppenheimer?
Let's do them together.
Well,
that'd be your longest episode ever, but the right people would appreciate it.
Yeah,
that's when we should have our pay account.
Marathon episode of
we could have our pay account. If you want to hear both of them together, you have to.
Oh God, think of the edit on that one. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. All right, so we have 2 new entrants into the Hall of Fame tonight, and I have a list of quite a few others that if they get to a certain point, like there are a bunch of people sitting at 4 right now that I've listed. Like Jack Lemmon is at 4, Joseph Cotten is at 4, Arlie Ermey is at 4, Michael Keaton is at 3, I think, right now. So there's a lot of people that could eventually make their way onto the list. Julia Roberts, I believe, is at 4. So if we ever end up doing Notting Hill or Steel Magnolias, which at least I haven't seen, then she's got a chance.
The last one I did was Aaron Brockovich. So
that's correct.
There is some kind of continuity there.
Yeah. Like Roger Deakins will eventually get there, but we have some other cinematographers that we might be able to get in there. I don't know. Technically, and I'll throw this out here, I don't think Christopher Nolan is yet eligible as a screenwriter because he didn't write all of the Batman movies. So he will, at some point, be our next double nominee for the Hall of Fame, but it is not yet that time. So, all right. 2 more entrants in our 2025 July class is Christopher Nolan and John Ratzenberger. Just as God intended.
I know I think of them simultaneously all the time.
Anytime I see John Ratzenberger on the street, I go, but where's Christopher Nolan? It feels strange that you're so by yourself, John.
Well, actually... Anyway, we left off at best performances. Dad, who did you have down?
I have Charles Laughton. It's his vision. It's his concept. I think this movie is him at the center and everything else is a spoke. There are some really good spokes, but I think ultimately the overall picture is his doing.
Normally, we gravitate towards a lot of directors in best performance due to the gravity of the amount of things that they're responsible for on a given picture. And the tonality, the musical choice, the casting, all of those things go into this. And I can recognize Laughton's greatness and effect on the film. Certainly, I have him as my best secondary performer, however, because one of the performances on screen for me supersedes what else is going on in the rest of the film, and that's Robert Mitchum. And I think so much of this movie is carried by how good he is up until the point where he gets shot and then is like basically Bugs Bunny or Elmer Fudd running away. Like, I got shot in the backside and so, and it just kind of like, okay, that's an odd reaction for how serious the rest of the film is, but okay.
I have cinematographer Stanley Cortez, who without his eye behind that eyepiece, I don't know that the film would have the aesthetic oomph that it has. There's a certain level of German expressionism that he uses in basically every single internal set and every single external set that really sets the mood. And it's one of those things where it's like, when you look at the credits for Citizen Kane, you have Orson Welles giving co-credit to Greg Toland, the cinematographer, saying that he's on par with what I did. If you like what I did, it's because I was inspired by him or he was inspired by me. And I think that definitely qualifies for Stanley Cortez because I'm saving a certain actor for my most charismatic performance, and I don't want to blow it all the way. So
let's move to best secondary. I already gave mine that, again, by the weight of all of his contributions and totality of the pieces that he has put together here, I have Charles Laughton. I think it would be difficult for a film of such repute to not have him somewhere. I just thought Mitchum for me was a little bit more important, but I certainly understand anybody who goes with him as best performance.
My best secondary performance was Stanley Cortez. By the way, what other claim to fame did Stanley Cortez have?
Magnificent Ambersons.
That's one, but he also was the original director of Chinatown before he was kicked off a few weeks into production.
I have lived with that movie for 20 years and had no idea. That's amazing.
Creative differences.
Gotta love that
that-
contractual bullshit. Why aren't we getting along? Oh, just differences. That's all. Just creative differences.
So Cortez's use of a newer type of film that Kodak had just developed was phenomenal. That created the ability to contrast light and dark. The way, for example, in the scene right before Shelly Winters is murdered, her lying with her head in halo, looking like she's in a coffin, just foreshadows her death. It just, there was so much about this that visually was so stunning. My hat's off. It's a masterful work.
So the shot underwater, I don't know if anyone has discussed how that was actually accomplished.
It's
Yes.
a dummy.
It is a dummy? Okay.
It is a
Yeah,
dummy.
And they took a plaster mask of Shelly Winters
Yes.
and that they had makeup do and then put it together so that it looked like her and then filmed through the water in a tank. It was
Okay.
it was muted enough that you couldn't tell.
Okay. Because I was going to say, that reminds me a lot of like films that are much more recent, such as Shape of Water and Del Toro.
Well, he's a study of the classics. I mean, he loves that stuff. Ironically, the movie that he's obsessed with came out the same year as this, Creature from the Black Lagoon.
So who was your best secondary, Ryan?
Lillian Gish, icon of the silent cinema, and her as the gun-toting Mother Goose. Literally every single scene of her holding that shotgun that seems to be as tall as she is from the porch, just waiting for somebody to step onto her property so she can shoot them, is some of the most fun I've had watching a movie in a long time. It's one of those things where it's like it trades on what the audience knows her persona as from silent film, and then brings her back as kind of like this silver fox, if you will, not to demean her or say anything that is sexualized or anything, but silver fox in that it is definitely, it's an older performance from a veteran of the industry. And those can always be counted out and they can always be underappreciated. But I think that she finally got the recognition she deserves. And it's only been in the last couple of years, really.
You can always tell the old silent film stars when they do a more modern film. They have ways of expressing themselves with their faces that other actors never learned how to do. And hers too, which is you could tell when she's calling bullshit because she had that look of realization that just came across her face. That's from years of having to do that without saying a word.
It's like when Garbo shows up in Ninotchka and all of a sudden she's speaking and you're like, wait a second, Garbo can speak? This is already a mind melder. And then as it goes on, as she delivers what is pretty much an understated performance, at the end of the movie, people go, oh, that movie's amazing because of Greta Garbo. It's like, well, she says like maybe 5 things in the entire thing. It's like, no, but her face, her presence, it's all there. And that is how I look at Lillian Gish in this film. She is there. And she is not letting her opportunity get through her grasp.
Most charismatic, I have the child actor of John, Billy Chapin. I think he's actually fantastic in this movie. And I don't think child actors often get enough credit when they're actually really good. But this kid really has to carry a significant portion of the film and be not only the representative avatar of the film for the audience, but he also has to be kind of the moral high ground throughout the majority of the film. So he's carrying a lot more for what we normally expect of child actors in this day and age. I recognize we did our episode on Shane last year, or maybe it was even the year before. Gosh, I don't even remember. And Kieran had some criticisms of that particular child actor. This is not one of those. This is like up there with, I think it's Henry Thomas from E.T. that is constantly compared, or why can't I think of the actor's name, but Haley Joel Osment. That's Sixth Sense, as some of the great child performances.
It's weird. I watched Shane 3 days ago because the 4K finally came in. And I actually think that kid is actually good. I mean, there's some kind of moments where you just look at him and you're like, his eyes are a little cross-eyed. Is he okay? Like, does he need like some Thorazine or what's going on here? But
probably needed the bathroom.
Yeah. But I think he's good. And I think at the end when he calls for Shane to come back, I wish that Shane would come back. But that's me. I'm a softie. What can I say?
So who's your most charismatic?
That would be the great Robert Mitchum. Every single scene he's in simmers with heat because of that guy. He's throwing heaters left and right, just pitching straight down the middle. I'm using metaphors that I don't usually use because I don't watch sports. He slams the dunk. He does other things. He gets the puck in the net. Is that how hockey works?
Yes.
Yes.
He is amazing in this film. Every single he just drips with charisma. It's impossible to deny the power of Robert Mitchum in my eyes. And that's why I didn't give him best performance.
Mine is Robert Mitchum also, for most of the same reasons. His performance was as powerful as any I think I've seen in a while. By far the most powerful performance he has given. I think towards the latter part of his career, wasn't sure, a lot of people weren't sure what to do with him. I mean, he started doing mini-series, War and Remembrance, and then he's popping up as the old curmudgeon on Scrooged, and then he's filling in for a season when on it's a TV show now, and then series of films with Denzel.
The Equalizer. When
he filled in for a season when Edward Woodward had a heart attack on there. That's how his career kind of ended. It didn't end with a bang. It kind of ended with a fizzle.
Let's move to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here. I have Ben Harper's arrest. So kind of the opening scene with Peter Graves and handing off the money. Then he's arrested and we have the callback moment that eventually we get in the ending when Powell is arrested as well. Then we have Powell's arrival, which is the first time that we really get the right hand, left hand speech. Then we get wedding night, self-explanatory there. In the basement, which is the scene where they go down into the basement. He's trying to lead him on a chase. They can't figure out how to get away from him, but I think that's a wonderful scene. And then finally, the night of the hunter, which I will put as the kind of final scene where Rachel's holding the shotgun. He's trying to invade. She eventually shoots him. And we kind of get the resolution of the film, more or less, except for the ending couple of scenes with that kind of personal resolution. But at least the resolution of the Powell character, more or less. Any others that you would like to add, either of you?
I seldom do this, but I would like to add one scene, which is and I'll consider it a broader scene, which is Mrs. Cooper finds the children through the point where Powell shows up again. I'll just make that one big scene.
Okay.
And mine is very short. It's just the scene of the submerged Shelly Winters, which coupled with the seaweed that they have that kind of adorns her face is one of the most kind of like iconic images I think that you take with you once the movie's over. It's one of those things where, I mean, we just discussed how the hell they actually did that. It's one of those things where it's like when you watch the scene, you're like, I don't know how the illusion is pulled off, but I definitely want to find out. But it's definitely a remarkable scene.
All right, so we have 7 nominees here. We have Ben Harper's arrest, Powell's arrival, wedding night, Willa's demise, In the basement, Rachel to the rescue, and The Night of the Hunter. Out of these, what is the best scene?
I have The Night of the Hunter, simply because I think it is the culmination of good versus evil that the whole film is working towards.
ironically enough, and I know that I said earlier on that a lot of this movie is stuff that is inaccessible to me because it's more through a visual medium, but the most dialogue heavy scene of the movie for me is Wedding Night. And that's the one where I feel there's the most subtext and other stuff that's going on that I could really chew on. So for me, that's my best scene, because I think there's so many other things at play in that moment that we're only touching the surface of.
I'll second that. I think that's definitely a fair decision. I mean, there's a lot of, every single option you gave is an opportunity to talk about something fascinating. But I think that, Wedding Night is, that's up there.
All right, then my favorite scene is the one in the basement. I think that's probably the most thriller, horror-esque scene from the entire movie. To me, it's the scene where, if you're going to give any criticism on borrowing or homage, it's probably the closest to Hitchcock this movie specifically becomes, based on the viewpoint of what we're given, where it's, I think they do a couple of small cuts to like showing the shoes on the steps, and it's in a very slow, methodical grind. There's the realization with the doll and kind of the playing the children off against each other. You have the impending doom with the score that's laid over the top of it. I think there's a lot there to also chew on, but it's the one where I've probably felt maybe less intellectually tickled as I was with Wedding Night, and much more emotionally driven.
And it's interesting you mentioned Hitchcock, because this is an American production with a British director. So obviously there's already some comparisons, because Hitchcock has been working in America for 12 years at this point. And I believe the exact same year Diabolique happens, the movie that he wished he made, but that the French got to him before he did. So this is this is the era of Hitchcock. And I think that you're definitely right that Lawton is borrowing from the visual language and making it his own.
And they both have a background in silent film to borrow from for a lot of where this movie's strength comes from.
Absolutely.
Other favorite scenes?
I have Mrs. Cooper, and I explained that the whole thing, it's the children's redemption. It's their protector. It's, the place of shelter and comfort and nurturing that they've sought. And if you watch closely, the number of times that John is going up and he's trying to look at her, or he's stroking her hand. He falls asleep with his hand or his head on her leg. This is the mothering, the nurturing that he never accomplished. And I think that says a lot about what the film is ultimately trying to express, is that these wayward children still needed that level of care and comfort to be healthy and whole.
My choice, I already mentioned earlier in the episode, but when he's watching the burlesque dancer and he has the pocket knife in his pocket and it pops out like an angry erection, because this is a man who is definitely impotent and is definitely reacting to the universe in that fashion. It's one of those things where I'm amazed that in 1955 it was allowed to be in a movie, because it is so suggestive and it is so highly charged that it's one of those things where, like, if I was in the Breen office, and I'd kill myself if I was in the Breen office, because I'd be a fascist. But if I was a fascist reading that scene and determining whether or not it would make it in the movie, that's a big red mark. That's a big X for me. But thank God I wasn't. Thank God I'm not. That scene is awesome.
Most indelible moments?
Ooh, right hand, left hand. And I say that because without it, we don't get Radio Raheem, one of the greatest characters of the 1980s in Spike Lee's joint, Do the Right Thing. He has the gold brass knuckles, if you will, I guess gold knuckles, that spell out love and hand. And he said, let me tell you about the relationship between right hand and left hand. And that all comes from this movie, and so I love it for that.
For me, it is The Night of the Hunter, because it is the most terrifying. It is the one that's the culmination. The only thing that would have made it better is, quite frankly, I don't know why, getting shot in the face, they didn't blind him.
Well, do we really see him again?
Only when they arrested him and tackled him to the ground. And then bringing him out in shackles to avoid being lynched.
Okay. I also had that as the most indelible moment for me. I think you could make a case for Willa's demise in that iconic underwater shot that we've already talked about. I think you could make a case for the arrest of Powell individually, although I would probably lump that in with the overall Night of the Hunter portion of the film. But for me, it's an adult coming to the aid of the children, and albeit like a kindly older woman who is not the person that you'd think would be able to stand up to a multi-serial killer who is definitely trained and experienced in murdering for his own devices. But she's the one who eventually pushes back and causes him to meet his end. So that looks like another good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 246 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Tom Troop, 97, American actor, Kelly's Heroes, My Own Private Idaho, The Devil's Brigade, Star Trek, Cheers. Charles Oggins, 81, American choreographer, Red Dwarf, Labyrinth, Five Guys Named Mo, and he was also a dancer. Harry Stanjovsky, 66, Canadian actor, Assassin's Creed, Barney's Version, Young, Robin Hood. Alan Bergman, 99, American songwriter, The Way We Were, Don't Bring Me Flowers Anymore. Oscar winner 1968, The Thomas Crown Affair, 1974, The Way We Were, and 1984, Yentl. Eileen Fulton, 91, American actress, As the World Turns, Nero Wolfe, Our Private World. Malcolm Jamal Warner, 54, American actor, The Cosby Show, Major Crimes, Suits, The Resident. Ozzy Osbourne, 76. English singer-songwriter, reality TV actor. Godfather of heavy metal. Black Sabbath. Songs included Paranoid, War Pigs, Sabotage, Iron Man. Solo songs, Mama, I'm Coming Home, No More Tears. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Black Sabbath in 2006, and then for a second time as a solo artist in 2024.
And one final name that we will read that came up late today, that'd be Renee Kirby, 70, American actor, with appearances in Shallow Hal and Stuck on You. Now, obviously, I think most people either listening to this show or people who just appreciate any level of music history are familiar with Ozzy Osbourne, given his sheer presence as a celebrity in like the early 2000s, that he was a reality TV star. He did cameos in random movies, such as he was part of the Presidio of different cameos or different cut scenes in a montage of an Austin Powers movie that was doing a bit during that point. But he's obviously had a profound effect on music, multiple time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee. I think most people are familiar with at least a few of these songs that we've mentioned, if not know them very well. Now, me growing up in a parochial school background where they literally showed us a movie telling us about how almost every musician, including the Beatles, somehow worshipped Satan. My relationship with Ozzy Osbourne was very complicated as a young person, and I only got to experience some of his music in my rebellious phase when
You were a hellion.
well,
Your goth period was quite interesting.
yes, that 2-hour period was really profound.
And if you've never seen it, check out The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years, where he is a significant portion of that documentary and is absolutely uproarious in every single scene that he's in. The entire movie is hilarious, but he's, in particular, he has like this domestic life that you would never think of looking at Ozzy Osbourne. This is 20 years before his sitcom or reality show, whatever you want to call it. I call it a sitcom. But I think 1988 is when it came out. Excellent. I think it's streaming on Night Flight Plus right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, what is Night Flight Non-Plus? I mean,
well, Night Flight Non-Plus doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
Now, so if you want Night Flight, you got to get the app. It used to be a late night show.
Okay. All right. I understand now. I was going to say, like, usually the plus imbues that there's like an expanded version of this. And it didn't seem to me that if you're your own streaming service, that there was anything prior to that than what you essentially created, unless you were coming from a legacy media company. But okay, I digress. I think the most complicated name to talk about here is Malcolm Jamal Warner, and it has nothing to do with him. That's the trouble. First off, he died in a really tragic way.
Yes.
That if you want, go read for yourself about everything that happened with that, and that's a difficult one to swallow, being the youngest member on this list. But also, I don't have any appreciation for how big the Cosby Show was in its moment. I can only know about it after the fact and people telling my generation how big that show was. It's not mentioned now in the same breath as like Friends and Seinfeld and Cheers and MASH, the other great sitcoms, but I think, let me know if I'm wrong, it probably should be.
Well, it definitely should be, because quite frankly, that show saved NBC. NBC was about broke as a viable television network. And there was talk of affiliates leaving and right and left and all kinds of stuff and going independent. This is about the time Fox was starting to set up, and there was threats of like mass exodus to join the Fox network and everything else. And it basically came down to Brandon Tartikoff approaching Bill Cosby and says, "Would you like to do a show? Do whatever you want." And Bill Cosby taking basically his entire family and most of his stand-up routine and creating a show around it. And it became so popular. I question whether Cheers would have survived past the first or second year, but for the fact that the Cosby Show started at 7 o'clock Central, which would be 8 o'clock Eastern. And it was followed by Family Ties and Michael J. Fox, and then Cheers. And then after that, it was originally, trying to remember what show was on there for a while. And then eventually it became Seinfeld. And that 8:30 slot is where they put every show, because the first three were so rock solid that no one ever churned the channel. And in fact, the 9 o'clock slot was almost as big, because that was Hill Street Blues. And that controlled Thursday night for a decade.
And when Cheers was on in its first season, it was the lowest rated show on television. Like, not even an exaggeration, literally the lowest rated. And yet managed to stay on the air for 11 years. And I think you're right. The Cosby Show had a lot to do with that.
Thursday night was a lock. I mean, if you got put on Thursday nights on CBS or ABC,
Good luck to
you.
you.
Good luck. Yeah, that was a sign your show was dead. They were just looking for a way to mercifully kill it.
So we remember all of these here fondly with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's move to best lines. I'll just take the obvious one right off the top here. Reverend Harry Powell, noticing John staring at the words love and hate tattooed across his knuckles. Ah, little lad, you're staring at my fingers. Would you like me to tell you the little story of right hand, left hand? The story of good and evil? H-A-T-E. It was with this left hand that old brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low. L-O-V-E. You see these fingers, dear hearts? These fingers has veins that run straight to the soul of man. The right hand, friends, the hand of love. Now watch, and I'll show you the story of life. Those fingers, dear hearts, is always a warrin' and a tuggin', one again to other. Now watch 'em, old brother left hand, he's a fightin', and it looks like love's a goner. But wait a minute, hot dog, love's a winnin'. Yes, sirree, it's love that's won, and old left hand hate is down for the count.
Well, you stole my quote, so thanks a bunch. I was going to do that entire monologue off the top of my head, and it figures I can't do it. But I do love that. That is the greatest moment of dialogue in the entire film. That's the greatest moment of the entire film, period. But that is one hell of a monologue.
Salvation is a last-minute business, boy. Harry Powell.
I got nothing.
Okay. Rachel Cooper. It's a hard world for little things.
You know, when you're little, you have more endurance than God is ever to grant you again. Children are man at his strongest. They abide. Rachel Cooper.
Reverend Harry Powell singing. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. I like the dichotomy of that against what Rachel is singing, because he's removed Jesus from his version of it, and there's just these like extra long held leanings instead of leaning on Jesus. I didn't know, I guess I'm not as familiar with this hymn or this song, but him removing the Christ figure from his version of religion and his self-righteousness, I thought was an interesting play.
I'm a strong tree with branches for many birds. I'm good for something in this world, and I know it too. Rachel Cooper.
Rachel Cooper, they abide and they endure.
Seems like every good line in this movie comes from Rachel Cooper.
She's got a lot of them, but I have some other ones coming up here.
Ben Harper. What religion do you profess, preacher? Harry Powell. The religion the Almighty and me worked out betwixt us.
Rachel Cooper. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Whereby their fruits ye shall know them.
I'm out.
All right, I got a couple other ones here. Icy Spoon. When you've been married to a man for 40 years, you know all that don't amount to a hill of beans. I've been married to Walt that long, and I swear in all that time, I just lie there thinking about my cannon. And I asked my mother if she's thinking about canning. She did not take well to that one. Anyway, Ben Harper. I robbed that bank because I got tired of seeing children roaming the woodlands without food, children roaming the highways in this here depression, children sleeping in old abandoned car bodies and junk heaps, and I promised myself that I'd never see the day when my young'uns had want. And finally, Reverend Harry Powell. And this feels like the most fascist line of the entire thing. Not that you mind the killins. There's plenty of killins in your book, Lord.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to the Stanley Rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a designation of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out. So from 1960 to today. What is the legacy of this film as shared between the audience and the industry at large? 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go first. Legacy. Industry. Deadpanned for a long time. But 2008, as you noted, 71st greatest movie of all time by Empire Magazine and its list of 500 greatest movies. 2012, Sight and Sound Magazine listed as number 63. In 2022, it was 25. It was recognized by AFI's 100 Thrills at 34, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains for Harry Powell at 29. And the fact that this was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry in 1992, I am going to give the industry, based on the fact I can't give it any higher than this because most of this was 25 years after the film was made. So I'm going to have to give it for the industry. I'm going to go as high as a 4.5 because of how much the industry in the last 25 years has really loved this film. But for the public...
So hold on. Just for a second here. You've brought up a question in, I guess this is the 6th season of the show that we've never actually addressed. Does it incorporate every piece of the time from the 5 years after it came out, so roughly 1962 today? Does it incorporate that entire period of time, or does it only incorporate where we're at kind of in a modern sense? You have now separated out that there's basically this waiting period for this movie that went through re-examination. Now, to be fair, and I'll just throw these things out here. I was recently on an episode discussing the movie Spy Kids, which is also in the National Film Registry as of 2024. So you could take that as a sign that being in the National Film Registry isn't the badge of quality that it once was, because Spy Kids is just not a good movie. It's not.
Okay.
However, what I will say in its defense is that it went in 1992. The first year of induction was 1989, and they only entered 25 films. And I think religiously they've only put in 25 films a year since that time. So by that meaning, this is the 4th year that it was being done.
I had to give it, all right, I'll take your point, and I'll go back down to 4. But I have to give it those points up because of the fact that there has been such an onslaught of
I haven't made a point yet.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying is you've asked a question, you've thrown it out there, and we have never grappled with this question before.
Okay.
So where do you want to put this? You're starting to place a new criteria that we have not yet done so. And not that we couldn't have, but it's the first time that the question's been asked. So therefore, do we have to go back and reassess things like It's a Wonderful Life, which took on a life like 20 years after it came out, or The Wizard of Oz and their legacies? I
think we did, but we weren't quite so overt. And nor do I think that we actually, this time distance between when it was released and when it took on its new life was not quite as dramatic as this film.
All right. I'll let this exist as a potential listener feedback section of the show because, again, I don't think we have actually discussed it in relation to the other films that I mentioned, nor some other ones that I could probably think of if you gave me more time. But it's at least an interesting opening question to put a monkey wrench into legacy for once. But continue.
Well, okay. So I understand your point about, or at least the question. So I will go down to a 4 because of just the fact that this film was dead for 25, 30 years. But the public, I got to go with for legacy within the time frame. It's improved among cinephiles. And it started, I think, in the 60s and early 70s and has gained, but I can't go any higher than a 2 for the public, so I'm at a 6.5 overall.
Some other films that, as I'm just sitting here thinking about it, that we'd have to also throw in that category. Jean Dielman, which only recently got unearthed and became the number 1 film on the Sight and Sound list.
Well, that should have stayed buried.
Okay, but then let me throw these other ones at you. The same thing happened to the previous number 1 on the Sight and Sound poll from 2012, Vertigo, as well as the other films of the 50s from Hitchcock that kind of got buried a little bit. Like, you couldn't see Rear Window for 30 years after it came out.
Because Hitchcock buried it on purpose.
Okay, but then, so the legacy doesn't exist for 30 years, and I think it's currently, if it's not in our top 10, it's in our top 15 movies.
But we took it into account.
I don't think we did. And that's what I'm saying. You're introducing a new wrinkle 6 seasons in that we've never accounted for.
I think we did take it into account. We just never expressed it.
Okay. I will not take it into account here. I think it's where it currently is over the entire period, and you judge it as an overall or a whole. Things can ebb and flow and have different narratives throughout their lives. And I think you've mentioned it before in the history of the show. The first time that you did, I believe, would have been our All the President's Men episode from the night of the 2020 election, going back that far, where you said different films will take on a different historical note and will meet the moment, and then they will age out, and then they will come back and they will meet the moment again. And they just have different lives through cycles as they age. So I'm going to take this one as it sits right now. I'm going to just say on an industry level, because this is a film that is appreciated by the film historian community. It's influential of several reputable directors, and they've all seemingly like borrowed this film. They celebrate this film. I'm going to say it's a 5. But where the flip side is, and this is where we usually take off the points, from an audience perspective, again, going back to the fact that the average film goer, and again, not the people that watch like 2 new films a year, but rather the people who go to the theater about 5 to 10 times a year, and we'll see some other things variously throughout the year, will watch TV regularly. They're not like my mother, who, even though she has a film appreciation because of the 2 of us, is not that into the soup with all the newer stuff and some of the other things that we would normally have. And if you need any examples, just listen to any of the episodes she's been on, where she will even say that herself. So I don't think I'm talking out of school on that one. But I think the separation between the 2, I would be remiss to say that a significant portion of cinephiles have probably seen this movie, but I don't think the general public has. So I'm going to split the difference, and I'm going to go a 2.5 for the audience, and thus I have a 7.5. So Ryan, did you follow all of that? Or
I did.
Okay.
In terms of the industry, because of the influence that it's had on multiple generations of filmmakers, even though it has not really had but that's the issue there, is that it's had an effect on people who are the movers and shakers, but not necessarily the people that pay their checks. So I'm going to have to go a 3.5 on industry. And in terms of people just having shitty taste in movies and not watching good stuff like Night of the Hunter, I'm going to give the audience score a 2.
For a total?
Yeah. Of, what did I say already?
5.5. It should
5.5. There you go.
So I wonder what the middle of that is.
That would be a 6.5.
Not bad.
Really good pulling that right up, Tom. You didn't even need help with the math.
No, I can be occasionally good with the math. That's why I've only just now gone to law school. Anyway, now, impact and significance. Since you went first on the last category, I will go first here. This is the initial 5 years after this movie came out. And so it's also a split category between audience and industry in the moment that it was made, essentially. for a total of 10 points, 5 and 5 apiece. I have a hard time. I mean, like, none of the box office numbers are really known for this film because it did that poorly. I don't think people understood it. I don't think the industry appreciated it in its moment. Lawton didn't go on to direct anything else. I think the most notable thing that he did after this was Witness for the Prosecution, which is also a very good film, but it's its own thing. Mitchum goes on to be who he's going to be, but it's not like he's this uber star. So I have to give this a 1 and a 1, which I think is one of the rare times that I've ever done so.
I would go with, for impact, you're definitely right. That's a 1. The fact that this was, if we're talking about the first 5 years of this movie's existence, it's pretty much a non-entity. It was one of those things where it's like, people would just step on it and just wipe their shoes off and be whatever. Doesn't matter to them. In terms of significance, I'd say that the Scorsese crowd was already gaining steam at this point. The movie brats were on the rise. So I'm going to have to give it a 2.
But that isn't until the 70s, and we're talking about 1955 to 1960.
Well, then I got to give it a 1.
And that's what I mean. Like, I'd love to give this more, but it's like the anti-Star Wars, the anti-Jaws, and how it was appreciated in the moment it was made.
Yes. And I would concur on the 1 and 1. The best thing you can say for this film is that it did not have the evening or the late night talk show monologues to poke fun at how poorly it did in the box offices.
I mean, did they really take pot shots at everything that did poorly?
For example, the whole ripping apart of Ishtar was in large part because that was a punchline in Carson's monologue at least 3 times a week when it was released.
Okay. I mean, I didn't live through that era, so I guess I don't know. My ignorance is showing on old things of late night, but all right. Let's move to Novelty then. This is a measure of the originality of anything having to do with the film and the execution of the film in its entirety, for 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Ryan, would you like to lead this category for us?
Originality, I have to give it a 3, mainly because it is not an entirely original script. It is born from a novel, which was then born from a true life incident. And originally, the entire screenplay was 193 pages, which is absolutely absurd. So I have to give it, on that curve, maybe a 2. And then I guess I'll go with a 4 on the other side.
So a total of 6?
Yes, total of 6.
As far as the originality on this, for me, I know that, Dad, you constantly harp on whether something feels like it's new or was novel in the moment that it was made. And while this does have some allusions to a silent era style of filmmaking, has some certain Gothic nature to it, there are allusions to kind of a Hitchcock-esque thriller nature associated with it. I still, even if you directly compare this to a Hitchcock movie, think it separates itself enough, both by its lead character, its subject material, and its style, in a way to me that is distinct. And I really don't think there are that many films like this from this era. This falls right smack dab in the middle of the decade, and you look on almost either side of it. You had roadshow, big budget, like epic films, versus you had some musicals thrown in here and some other stuff. The only other one from this era that I could say, and I love that this movie, so by making this comparison, I'm doing it somewhat favorably, but A Day in the Sun is the only other film that I could directly compare that feels like this film. And so from that, I'll give it a unicorn quality of a 5. And as far as the execution for me, I will only give it a 4 because I do feel the ending still falls apart for me. That could change over time, but where I'm at is a 9.
I have to go on the originality down a little bit because this is Double Indemnity meets Grapes of Wrath at a time when silent video or film was being done yet. But it's completely fresh and original, and it does not really mirror either of those. It just has elements of both. And so I'm going to give it a 4 for the originality. But
so hold on. Before you move on, if you take elements of, let's say, blue and yellow, and you take those two and you mix them together, does it not become a new color?
Yes, but it's not a primary color. Okay.
Whatever. Move on.
Anyway, so I'm at a 4. Execution. I love the cinematography. I love how it was shot. I love the imagery. I don't care about the ending. I don't think the ending was that poorly done. I think the ending was the way it should have been done, which is a point of redemption and what was really going to be Mitchum's ultimate crucifixion. He was being led off to his demise, his death one way or the other. So I don't have a problem with that ending. So I'm at a 5 for execution. So I am at a 9.
So that's an 8 average between the three of us. All right, let's move to classicness. Basically, this entire category is about how well something has aged or not. And since it is slightly easier to take points off for how poorly some things age comparative to others, we start at a baseline of 6. Dad, this is seemingly your favorite category. I will let you lead.
I have 2 points. This is supposed to be taking place in the South, and we have an entirely lily white cast. Okay, that's one thing.
Well, first off, it's not actually in the South because they mentioned Cincinnati along the river, but okay. You might be able to say it's Kentucky.
Okay. Regardless. And the other is the concept of the lynching is just troublesome. But this film holds up well. The problems with false prophets and ministers, serial killers, the need for protection of children from who are being mistreated or abused. These concepts so overshadow things. This film and the way it was shot and done, this film could, if it was released today, probably not in black and white, but still, if it was released today, I think it would be a very much more popular film because of the concepts and what took place. So from a classicness standpoint, I'm going to give it an 8 because I think that the overall concepts of what has, the way it was shot, who or how it was presented, and some of the concepts that are still prevalent today outweigh the 2 negatives I pointed out.
I think that, first off, I really don't have anything to say about this. It's a movie in 1955. Name me another movie in 1955 that didn't have a lily white cast. I mean, they were going to the point of having blackface. That was their color diversity. I would much rather have it just be a lily white cast than have blackface. Anyway, as far as that, I don't have any points to detract from this. I think it does have a level of timelessness. I think it's ahead of its time on several key issues that you mentioned. False prophets, heresy by the church, predation on young people. And I say that recognizing that right now, one of the biggest people to, or at least a group of people that harped on the predation of children and protecting children is having his crow come home to roost by not releasing the Epstein file. But anyway, I have this as a 9.5.
For me, I think that every movie not only speaks to the time in which it's made, but it speaks to the moment in which you watch it. And I think that the impact this film has not been dulled in the 70 years since it was made. It's one of those movies that I can watch constantly and get something new out of it every time, because there are layers to it that I think even the people who really love it still haven't unfolded yet. So I'm actually going to go for a 10.
I will go up to an 8.5 in thinking about it. I was kind of on the fence, but after your comments, I'll go 8.5.
So that's a 9.33 between the three of us. Rewatchability. Ryan, you selected this movie to do. This is basically up to you how subjective you want to be on 1 to 10, how often you'd want to rewatch this film.
Oh, I'm going to be super subjective. I've seen this movie 7 times, if I'm counting listening to the audio commentary. And as I said in the Classicness, I get something new out of it every single time. It's a movie that if anybody were to ever come up to me and say, hey, have you ever seen Night of the Hunter? Man, that movie's fucking crazy, man. We should watch that movie. Even if they're a complete stranger and might murder me in my sleep, I would still watch the movie with them. I'd give them the 93 minutes of my time, and I'd be okay with it. So I'm going to give it a 10 on rewatchability.
Okay, Dad, you already alluded to what your score may or may not be on this category. Where are you?
Generally, I give a 7 is on my normal watch list. An 8 is more than once a year. 9 is I'll watch it in a heartbeat. And there are very few 10s simply because I only save that for the very films that I love. Oh, fine. Shake your head. Whatever. I'm sure the audience, if they're listening, they can hear the seeds in the gourd rattling around. But anyway, the point being is a 7.5.
Okay. It's only that you keep going back and forth on what actually constitutes a 10 for you. And you earlier this season didn't give Caddyshack a 10 on the revisit. And then you came on like a month ago and said it should have been a 10 and you regret not giving it a 10. And there are other films in that list where you should be more expansive on what is a 10 for you. So you're just all over the board with what is a 9 versus a 10. But since this is a 7.5, I'm not going to argue the point. All right. As for me, I have tried to be much more objective about this category over the season, including films that I personally love, including Inception and The Empire Strikes Back and such. I think the runtime and convincing people to watch a 93-minute movie is a lot easier, but working against it is that it's black and white. It's got some very old aesthetic to it. And unless you're more into that, and I don't think that's for everybody, it may just instantly turn off some people. That being said, the people that will watch it also may be like myself who need a time or two to maybe get into it and see some of the artistry and the mastery that's behind it. So given the runtime, given that there is a engaging villain in the center of it that I think might keep people a little bit more interested, I'm going to go for roughly Dad's 7.5 as well, and we'll let it hold there. So that's an 8.33 between the three of us. So then for audience score on this one, we had an 82% for Google users and a 90% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 8.6. So to repeat the categories, we had a 6.5 for Legacy, a 2 for Impact and Significance, an 8 for Novelty, a 9.33 for Classicness, an 8.33 for Rewatchability, an 8.6 for Audience Score, giving us a final total of 42.76. And currently placing it on our list between Shadow of a Doubt and Broadcast News for number 188.
Good company to keep with it.
Now that I think about it, Shadow of a Doubt has like some elements that are overlapping here.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
As always, if you have any commentary for us, you can certainly let us know at any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast on Blue Sky, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Letterboxd. Any of those will work. And you can also find us RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT podcast or at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com.
I am thinking about opening another website called I'm Not
Patton Oswalt.
PattonOswalt.com.
Okay.
When you guys are sponsored by Squarespace, you should come back around to this.
Good note. Good note. All right, let's move to remaining questions for this one. I have a couple here. One, is Harry Powell lynched?
Do you want
Yes.
the real answer, or do you want the cynical one?
What
The
difference?
cynical one is he wasn't black, so no.
Okay. Wow. That was a little more cynical than I was expecting.
Yeah. The police protected him.
Okay. I'm going to move off of that one. Okay. And finally, what happened to the money?
It went back to who the dad stole it from. Doesn't go to the kids or the insurance company. Let's just say that whoever had the money to begin with gets the money back, and they're all made whole, and the kids get screwed.
I think Lillian Gish keeps it all. Just because I want to see her have a happy ending.
She had a happy ending, and it was regardless of money.
The other thing that I find a little bit odd about the final moments of the film, why does John react that way to the arrest of Powell? I mean, there's obvious synergy between his dad and Powell in that moment and how they're being arrested. But
Yes.
to go that far, you've been reprieved from the hunter. This should be your moment of triumph, not your moment of PTSD.
I don't know. We both in our careers deal with a lot of mental illness. And when does it ever make sense?
I suppose. All right. Remaining questions for either of you? All right. Hearing none, we want to thank Ryan for being on with us again for his third time. You are not currently scheduled to be back with us yet again this season, but we'd love to have you back anytime. We'll certainly share our schedule for next season with you. If there's anything that you'd like to do, certainly let us know. But go ahead and tell the people what you're working on again and where they can find you.
I work on the One Track Mind and Reels of Justice podcasts. You've heard me talk about how they're about commentaries and arguing in front of fake courts. The One Track Mind is on at 1. That is, again, the numeral 1 because I couldn't get the ONE Track Mind podcast on Instagram, onetrackmind.bsky.social on Blue Sky. I'm on Facebook, on Podchaser, on Patreon, and Reels of Justice is everywhere but Blue Sky because the person in charge of our social media does not believe that Blue Sky is viable. So it's not going to be there for the foreseeable future. You're welcome.
No animosity there. We'll let that one go. All right. Remaining thoughts for the week, Dad?
I really don't have any. Haven't had a chance to do too much, or as far as new things, haven't been able to get to the theater. I am looking forward to the Naked Gun revival. So, having seen the original in theaters and dragging your mother to it, who sat through it the whole time going, this is so stupid. I can only imagine that's what I'll hear this time too. 37 or 36 years later.
Wow, you guys would have, you actually would have been together for the original one.
Yes.
I thought it predated both of you, but okay.
Nope. We were first married and we went with another couple that were friends of Chris's from college.
Okay.
And he was a huge Airplane fan, and he and I both had watched the Police Squad television series when it was on, and were so excited when they were going to make this into a film. And the opening montage of the film, we're just falling out of our seats, and the ladies are just sitting there shaking their heads, not having any concept of why we thought it was funny.
That sounds like what our experience will be like this time.
Yes, it will.
Regardless, I would like to take my opportunity here at the end with my personal time to just say, people of TikTok, I know you feel aggrieved for some reason to comment on other people's content, and sometimes it's for good, like the Patton Oswalt thing. Sometimes it's for bad by comparing me somehow to like looking like JD Vance and whatever. I don't know. That was a weird comment. I'm going to try and let that one go. But the people who are insisting that Dom Cobb's totem was not the top in Inception, you're watching the wrong fucking movie. That's like an easy plot point. Yes, it was his wife's, term being was. He has no other totem throughout the rest of the movie. You guys are overthinking that plot line. That one's like an easy one. You don't even have to think that hard to understand that point in the movie. I'm sorry if that doesn't comport with whatever fantasy you've created for yourselves, but please, that the ending is supposed to be the ending because it's his totem. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. I don't understand people commenting and saying it's somehow this other thing, like it's his wedding ring is his totem. That makes no sense. This is easy. Just take the low-hanging fruit sometimes. Stupid people of TikTok. Yeah. But anyway, I am still plugging along on several of our collective projects that we're working on, including the James Bond prep that we're doing for our eventual live series that we'll do by the end of the summer. So still like 6 weeks to go to try and get in these last like 10 movies, which will go quickly for me, but still got to get through all of them. So regardless, I think that's a good place to stop it for this week. Thank you so much out there, everyone, for listening. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Next week, for our 273rd episode, we welcome back 5-time club member Walter Gaynor for a discussion on the existence of the devil with The Usual Suspects from 1995, celebrating its 30th anniversary. Directed by Bryan Singer, written by Christopher McQuarrie, cinematography by Newton Thomas Sigel, music by John Ottman, starring Benicio del Toro, Kevin Pollak, Chaz Palminteri, Stephen Baldwin, Pete Postlethwaite, and Kevin Spacey. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestalltimemmoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, TikTok, Blue Sky, at the handle @GMOAT Podcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.